Toyota 1000 Desert Race returned to its Botswana routes for the second year in succession from July the 7th through to July the 9th. This year, the Toyota event, always a highlight of the South African off-road calendar, took on the role of second round of the South African Cross-Country Rally Championship. An innovation this year saw the pre-race formalities and a ceremonial start based in a busy shopping mall in the centre of Gaborone, the capital of Botswana. It was a colourful scene with the citizens of Gaborone and competitors from all over South Africa entering into the spirit of the affair. For some of the locals, pre-race activity and some of the weird machinery was all a little strange. Proceedings got underway with a 20-kilometre prologue in a lion park outside Gaborone to determine race start positions.
The car's set up right, the car's a short car, it's not a long car, and on the tight stuff we get through a little bit quicker than the other blokes, and I'm just going to race it at my own pace.
Most competitors used the prologue as a vehicle shakedown rather than an all-out sprint. Former winner Api Reneker wasn't interested in heroics.
As jy op so 'n byeenkoms begin 'n fout te maak, dan jy baie standtyd en dit tel teen jou, en as jy almekaar kan ry en jy het nie foute gemaak by hele byeenkoms nie, dan behoort jy redelik vooruit te kom.
Apart from determining start positions, the prologue certainly served another useful purpose. Competitors quickly discovered that the Toyota 1000 Desert Race was going to offer up an awful lot of sand and thorns. While one or two were given a reminder that following the route sometimes presents problems, a few eyebrows were raised when Springbok Bux Carolyn came out of retirement to share a drive with brother Richard.
My boot needs me, so I decided we'll share the drive. And he's gonna drive one half till the refuel and I'll drive the other half.
For all the competitors, marking along the route was a major concern.
I think the organising seems good, so I hope the route will be safe. And normally, if it's well marked, it's normally safe. So I'm going to go as fast as I possibly can.
Then there were those for whom a weekend of racing in the Botswana bush came to a premature halt. By and large, the prologue was incident-free, but there were a couple of the expected frontrunners who ran into minor problems. One of those to find himself inconvenienced in such a fashion was Rob Walk.
At about the 12k mark, an oil pump belt came off. But I jumped out and managed to get that on fairly quickly. And only lost a minimum amount of time, I think about 2 or 3 minutes.
Pre-race favourite Alfie Cox on the Pro Action Castrol KTM also proved that even the top stars are not infallible. For the bikers and car crews alike, more sand and thorns would be on the race menu over the next 2 days. But that was fine by Herman Sulwalt.
Ek hoop as dit maar dieselfde tipe wedren as waterspan as dit is meer vir ons tipe kar. Meer vinniger en meer sanderige wedren. En as dit so is, dan dink ek het ons 'n goeie kans.
On 1,000-kilometre marathon events like the Toyota 1000 Desert Race, a secret of success for both bikers and car crews is to pace yourself. The race is won more often than not in the last 100 kilometres.
Ek het nie die krag en spoed om vir die ander manne te wil voorry nie, maar die bakkie weet ek is betroubaar. En dit wat ek maar gaan opreken.
Wise words from an old hand at off-road racing. The route for day one took crews from the start in Gaborone to a refuel at Shoshong at around the halfway mark for racing section 1. From there it was on to the overnight stop at the Kama Rhino Reserve, not far from Serowe. The off-road racing fraternity has a strange affinity for pre-dawn starts to races. Winter or summer, the order of the day, especially where the cars are concerned, is an early beginning to proceedings. This entails final vehicle checks, minor adjustments and running repairs where necessary. It's at this time that the adrenaline starts to pump with everyone keen to get underway.
Not really my favourite position from the front. I like being a little further back, and especially on the first day of the 1,000-kilometre race. I like the guys in front to pathfind, and we're just going to let guys go in front after a while and pace ourselves. It's Saturday, tomorrow is most important to be in front then. But today I think it's not really an advantage to be in front. You've got to pathfind, you've got to find the way. So tomorrow's the big day.
Klaus Degener and Thilo van Westenhagen in the BP Raceco were the first to be flagged away by Toyota's Flip Wilkin at the ceremonial start. The AA Motorsport Off-Road Commission has high hopes of seeing the Desert Race included on the International Cross-Country Rally calendar in the future, with the ceremonial start part of these plans. On a chilly winter morning, most of the citizens of Gaborone were still warmly tucked up in bed. The hardy souls on hand at the start were mostly connected with the crew, with convoys of service crews and well-wishers set to crisscross Botswana over the next 2 days in pursuit of the cars and bikes. Two giants of South African motorsport, Paddy Driver and Frans Boshoff, were among the late withdrawals when specialist parts for their AAD Video Sport Range Rover did not arrive in time. But as always, there were interesting newcomers. Springbok Jeremy Davies has for years been a front-runner in the motorcycle category. After a serious accident last year, Davies now found himself behind the wheel of a Nissan Safari.
It's another ball game, you know. Only thing that's really the same is the route and the navigating. I'll be able to pick up that. But when it comes to driving a car, it's completely different. You mustn't think you can jump from one to the other.
Out on the route, crews were hard at work. It was going to be a long and hard day in tough terrain. Kasi Kutsi and Richard Leek in the Toyota Hilux 4x4 Turbo were chasing after the Silwald cousins, Herman and Karl Heinz, in the Raceco. As is always the case with the desert race, tight and slow parts of the route were interspersed with fast sections where it was flat-out motoring. Kasi Kutsi and Richard Leek are both successful rallyers with vast rally and off-road experience behind them. The pair were one of 3 Toyota dealer team entries, along with R.P. Reiniger and Lucas Dreyer in a Land Cruiser, and Richard Schilling and Jeff Bell in a turbocharged 2-wheel drive Toyota Hilux. Behind Kutsi and Leek, the first driving stint in the lubrication equipment Raceco fell to Richard Carolyn, with brother Books waiting to take over at the refuel. Defending champions John Lambert and Eric Scholz were motoring along steadily in the Digidor Porsche twin-seater. Also looking comfortable were reigning off-road champions R.P. Reiniger and Lucas Dreyer in the Toyota Land Cruiser. The big Rover V8 motor in Rob Walk's Super Pave Raceco was sounding healthy. With no navigator, Walk was reliant to a large extent on clear route markings, but was making good progress. There were also no early problems for Nick Harper and Richard Hill in the Rockwell Porsche Raceco. Five FM Sun City winners Franz Czepek Sr. and son Franz Jr. were also going along steadily in the V-Motors Raceco. Weird-looking and noisy machines flat out through vast expanses of semi-desert produced an enthusiastic reaction from the locals. Well, not all of them. The father and daughter combination of Niels and Carla Eriksson had moved into an early lead in Class B in the special vehicle category. The aging Chenoweth was still going strong, but not far behind the Ericssons were former saloon car ace John Rowe and Tony Ball, who's more often to be seen piloting a VW Golf in national championship rallies. For Ball, sitting in the navigator's seat on an off-road event was a new experience. There were early problems for former biker Neil Woolridge and Paul Vermaak in the time Freight Sani. A huge dust cloud that could be seen from the air signaled that a race was in progress. The dust meant that progress was not always as rapid as crews would have liked. Cars milling around in circles searching for the correct route is also not unusual on off-road events. The lone Toyota Hilux parked forlornly at the start was that of Alfred van Vuren, who'd missed the start and decided to withdraw. The motorcycles were up next.
I haven't started in the front for quite a long time, so it will be nice for me. There's no dust. And there's no way I'm looking back. I'll be going flat out again for as long as it lasts. So it will be very exciting.
Willie, what happened?
For a sore Willie Ireland, the excitement didn't last long. After being first away, the always flamboyant Willie made contact with a tree trunk on the side of the road. The offending tree left Ireland bruised and battered and nursing a damaged knee. The SKF Delmas diesel Suzuki was also in no fit state to continue. With the hapless Ireland out of the race, Darrell Curtis moved into the lead on the Winston Yamaha. Curtis is a talented young rider, but there was danger behind him in the form of Springbok Alfie Cox on the Pro Action Castrol KTM. The diminutive Italian was carving his way through the field after a disappointing performance in the prologue.
I'm actually in the best position that anybody can be in. The dust is going to be a problem, I know. But if I can get past the guys, I've got my time made up and they've got to now pull out and leave me to make up the time that I'll catch up.
Some great camera work from the helicopter by cameraman Etienne Snyman captured Curtis hard at work at high speed through the thorn trees. The 250 class off-road machines hit top speeds of around 180 kilometers an hour, and it takes both courage and skill to go blasting through the bush with disaster always only split seconds away. Back on four wheels, matters were hotting up with the Silwald cousins being chased by Cassie Coetzee and Richard Leek in the dealer team Toyota Hilux. With the refuel up ahead, Obert Carolyn was on their heels in the lubrication equipment raceco. It was a high-speed train with the dust making life difficult for those doing the chasing. With only one road and thorn trees everywhere else, overtaking is no easy matter, and Carolyn was forced to play a waiting game. John Lambert and Eric Scholz were also well placed with the short wheelbase Digidor at home on the tighter sections. R.B. Reiniger and Lucas Dreyer were maintaining a steady pace in the top 10 in the Land Cruiser, but were being reeled in by Rob Walk in the Superpave Raceco. Up at the refuel, activity was often frantic as pit crews rushed to get their charges back into battle. Just as in Formula One racing, off-road refuel stops can mean picking up or dropping a place or two. Some of the repair methods are also a little rough and ready.
Leave them. Leave them. Leave them. Leave it.
Woman drivers Sabila Quant and veteran Springbok navigator Pete Swanepoel were going well in a Paris-Dakar Mitsubishi Pajero. Minus the odd body panel or two, the Richard Schilling Jeff Bell Toyota Hilux was looking a bit worse for wear. Not far behind them were Cliff Barker and Mike Redden in the AAD Land Rover, who'd stormed through the field after problems in the prologue.
Very dusty, but tight, and then it's very fast. Tight and fast, and it's fun. It's been fun.
Okay, go.
The AAD Land Rover hit trouble in the prologue when a pulley belt broke. Time loss saw Barker and Redden start almost from the back of the field in 51st place, and they had no option but to charge from the word go. At the refuel, they were on the fringes of the top 10, with the ruggedly built AAD Land Rover now going like a train. The inside of an off-road race car is Spartan, to say the least. The ride is also not up to saloon car standards, but the main requisite is that off-road vehicles go like hell and don't fall apart. In the motorcycle category, no one was really surprised to see Alfie Cox out in front on the Pro Action Castrol KTM. Cox is in a class of his own in Southern African off-road racing and caught and passed Darrell Curtis before the refuel point. Having lost 5th gear on the Winston Yamaha, Curtis was doing his best to stay with Cox. Thick sand on the route between the Shoshong refuel and the overnight stop was also causing problems for the competitors. Not that the problems were confined only to the motorcyclists. Space frame off-road cars don't have the smallest of turning circles, and getting underway again can be a problem. Franz Czepek Sr. and son Franz Jr. were the victims here. It took a while, but the 5FM Sun City 400 winners eventually got underway again, with the Porsche motor in the V-Motors Raceco working overtime. Falling off your motorcycle is an occupational hazard for off-road racers. 200 class leader Graham McLaughlin was the victim here on the Lesotho Office Equipment Kawasaki. There was at least one pair of willing hands to help McLaughlin, holding down a place in the top 5 to get underway again. Not far behind McLaughlin and going like a bomb was Alan Julian on the Pro Honda. With more power from a 250 machine, Julian didn't have the same problems with the sand as McLaughlin on the smaller and lighter Kawasaki. Still out in front in Class B was the father and daughter combination of Niels and Carla Eriksson in the Chenoweth. With a shorter wheelbase than many of the newer generation space frame cars, the Chenoweth handled the tighter sections of the route better than most. Cliff Barker and Mike Redden were still moving through the field in the AAD Land Rover. At times, progress was not as quick as the pair would have liked, and it was tough going near the end of a long day. For motorcyclists, overtaking cars is often a major problem. Barker and Redden moved over to make way for a motorcyclist who flashed past them at high speed. The passing motorcyclist was Chris Dodd. The Winston Yamaha rider started the day in 8th position and was going along steadily. All looked to be going smoothly, but with the overnight stop almost in sight, Dodd had the misfortune to drop out of the race. With campsites starting to spring up around the overnight stop in the Kama Rhino Reserve outside Serowe, the lubrication equipment raceco, driven now by Books Carolyn, was first across the line. Carolyn was still going through finish line formalities when the Shell Superpave raceco, driven by Rob Walk, came steaming down the last stretch to the finish. Although he was second across the line, corrected time was to put Walk into a lead of around 6 minutes over the Carolyn car. It was a tremendous performance by Walk, who left the start in 15th place after a relatively slow time in the prologue the day before. While a tired but obviously happy Walk headed off to do some maintenance work on the raceco before taking a welcome shower, RP Reinicke and Lucas Dreyer were next up at the finish in the dealer Team Toyota Land Cruiser. Reinicke's no stranger to Botswana conditions after farming in the area for many years, and it was a typically workmanlike performance from the Springbok pair. As usual, there was a family welcoming committee for Reinicke and Dreyer, and while Reinicke's wife brought the crew up to date on who'd arrived at the finish line before them, the leading cars started to come in thick and fast. Next to appear were Nick Harper and Richard Hill in the Rockall Porsche Raceco. The pair also had an uneventful day and were well placed in the top 10. Matters had not gone so smoothly for Cassie Coetzee and Richard Leake in the Toyota Hilux. Shortly after the refuel, a differential problem saw the Hilux reduced to two-wheel drive, and that was a major disadvantage in the thick sand.
8 seconds left. Okay, good luck. Thank you very much. Okay.
League looked cheerful enough, but the crew had lost valuable time. The Toyota didn't sound too healthy, and service crews had some work ahead of them. Corrected time put Rob Walk in the raceco ahead of the Carolyn car. Lambert and Scholz were followed by the Sulwalts with the first 4 cars special vehicles. A tremendous performance saw Barker and Redden in 5th place and leading the commercial vehicle class ahead of Reinicke and Dreyer. When the first of the motorcycles arrived at the overnight stop, no one was surprised to see it was Alfie Cox on the Pro Action Castrol KTM in the lead. A still fresh-looking Cox had made up 4 places, but more important, had opened up a sizable gap on the second-place rider. Second across the line was Darrell Curtis on the Winston Yamaha, but on corrected time, he was around 7 minutes behind Cox.
Gone. Still walk the bar. Xbox One! Yes, walk the club. Okay, Darrell. No, give him. Yeah, take a killer here, no. Hey, well done. Shell off. No ticket. Only go 4 gears from Super Moxie.
The next rider in was Graham McLaughlin. A place in the top 5 overnight had many people wondering whether or not history would repeat itself with a 200 machine taking overall honours. A comfortable overnight lead for Alfie Cox with 3 minutes separating Darrell Curtis, Alan Julian and Graham McLaughlin. Cox led the 250 class, McLaughlin the 200 class and Carl LaRue the 500 class. For crews and service teams, a long day was not yet over. For some, maintenance was a relatively trouble-free job, but for others, the repairs were major. While all around them, big or small repair work was going on, a lucky few of the competitors could stand around and have a chat about the day's proceedings. For some, the day's work was over, and they could relax around a welcome campfire. Camaraderie is one of the major attractions off-road racing holds for competitors, and at overnight stops, everyone pitches in to help. The sport also attracts some flamboyant characters, but out in the bush, no one really cares. Cliff Barker and former off-road champion Paddy Driver, forced to withdraw from the desert race at the last minute, discussed some of the finer details of off-road racing. Others were starting to think of their stomachs. With dawn breaking over Botswana, it was time for competitors to start thinking of another tough day ahead. The second racing section would see crews retrace their steps along the same 500-kilometre route from the overnight stop to the finish in Gaborone. Surprise, surprise, it was another early morning start with Robert Walk leading away the pack.
Big thing is to try and not have any problems with the car. If you can stay in the car and not get out, it should be plain sailing.
Bux Carolyn was entrusted with the first driving stint in the lubrication equipment raceco, with brother Richard set to take over at the refuel. Day one casualty Klaus Degener was forced into the role of a spectator as Carolyn set sail.
It's going to be difficult. I thought yesterday I may have pulled enough time on them, but obviously that 6 minutes is going to be hard to catch up.
Despite his 6-minute cushion over the Carolyn brothers, Walk knew he'd have to push hard all the way. While everyone is aiming to cross the finish line first, the off-road scoring system this year provides for races within a race. The special vehicle and production vehicles categories are scored separately, and drivers and crews are also fighting it out for overall victory in their respective categories. The Carolyns, the Sulwolds and other special vehicle crews in the top 10 all still had a chance of catching Walk if the Shell Superfave raceco picked up problems. For the Carolyn brothers, there was only one tactic, and that was to attack as hard as they could. Bux, the younger of the brothers, was doing just that. Behind the Carolyns, the Sulwolds, driver Herman and navigator Karl Heinz, were also making a bold bid to close the gap on Walk. The Sulwolds passed the Lambert car, which was in trouble, and the race was on, and everybody knew it. In the production vehicle class, it was a straight fight between Cliff Barker and Mike Redden in the AAD Land Rover and Toyota crew Arpi Reiniker and Lucas Dreyer in the dealer team Land Cruiser.
Our plan is obviously to try and win the class. And the two Toyotas are there, so we must chase them if we're behind them.
For Reiniker and Dreyer, it was also a case of full-on attack.
Waar ons voordeel het in die sand met die vierwieldryf is dat waar jy nou in skerp draaie ingaan, kan jy sien dat die spysvrames baie sukkel om uit die draaie uit te kom. Hulle skop geweldig baie. En dit kan naderhand tot nadeel vir hulle wees, hulle CV's miskien kan gaan. En waar ons miskien vinniger met die vierwieldryf uitkom, maar ek dink ons het gelykomstige kanse. Ander plekke weer, as jy het ons reguit seksies gekry wat baie dik sand was, maar met wobbles in, waar ons omtrent sê maar 120 km/h kan doen, dink ek doen hulle in die omgewing van omtrent 150 oor daai selfe terrein. So daar het hulle weer 'n voordeel bo ons.
And what of Alfie Cox?
I've got about 8 minutes lead on the next guy, and I think basically just to keep it rolling today, keep up your speed, not have any problems, and I think 8 minutes is quite a long way, and try and keep on the course, don't make any mistakes, take some wrong turns, because you lose time very quickly.
Second place, Darrell Curtis picked up gearbox problems on day one and was worried this would hold him up.
It just means I'll be okay for the first half of today. The second half gets a bit faster, so I'm going to lose out. I'll have no top end.
With overnight 200 class leader Graham McLaughlin falling by the wayside, Clayton Ensland found himself involved in a major battle with Atti Hofmeyer in the 200 class. Less than a minute separated the pair, and while they were fighting it out, Vickers van Deventer was starting to pull away from Billy Coetzee in the quad racer category. The race had taken its toll on the quads, and van Deventer and Coetzee were the only runners left. Approaching the refuel point, the race had taken a dramatic turn. Bux Carolyn had taken the lubrication equipment raceco into the lead. Now that he was in front, Carolyn was pushing hard to try and give brother Richard a cushion at the driver change at the refuel. Carolyn took over the lead when Walk lost time through a puncture. Walk was also flat out to try and regain lost ground. Not far behind the Shell Superpave raceco, the Sulwald brothers had moved into third place in another raceco. Matters were hotting up. Defending champions John Lambert and Eric Scholz were gradually falling behind in the Digidor, but Cliff Barker and Mike Redden were going like the clappers in the AAD Land Rover. Hot on their heels were Reinecker and Dreyer, with a tremendous battle developing between the two crews, with the prize overall honours in the commercial vehicle category. With their differential problem solved, Kasi Coetzee and Richard Leek were slowly gaining ground in the dealer team Toyota Hilux. They were still a long way behind Barker and company, but Coetzee was as cheerful as ever.
Cut the motor. Thank you. Drink that stuff. You check what happened to Maradona. No, that's what I got motor in. I'm scared. Listen, like making you. After that, I will break too late. You'll make the World Cup.
After his driving stint, Bux Carolyn stayed on at the refuel to help out other crews.
Going according to plan, we had to catch Rob by 6 minutes. He had a puncture, and then we pulled another 6 odd minutes on him. So if we can just maintain that pace, we'll be there.
While Alfie Cox went on his merry way out in front on the Pro Action Castrol KTM, Darrell Curtis was starting to struggle a little on the Winston Yamaha.
I'm bitching a bit with the gearing. Otherwise, everything's fine.
Made any difference with the change in the sprocket?
Yeah, perfect now. Much better.
6 minutes and 15
They
seconds.
actually made a little bit of the dust is bad behind the cars. Otherwise, it's not too bad. They're fairly spaced out.
All right.
That's okay.
Okay, that's it. Darrell. 6 minutes, 15 seconds. You can catch it up now, right? You've only made 45 seconds in 250 k's. You're sleeping.
As Curtis headed back into the fray, the battle in the car category had taken another dramatic turn. Rob Walk was back in the lead in the Shell Super Pave Raceco after Obut Carolyn picked up a puncture 40 kilometres from the finish. Those who maintain that marathon events like the Toyota 1000 Desert Race are won and lost over the last 100 kilometres was starting to make sense. At the final control point, Carolyn was still in touch with Walk and trying desperately to close the gap. Behind the unfortunate Obut, tension was also starting to build. Cliff Barker and Mike Redden in the AAD Land Rover were still involved in a tremendous struggle in the commercial vehicle category, with R.P. Reinecker and Lucas Dreyer in the Toyota Land Cruiser. Barker and Redden, after starting in 51st position on day one, had performed heroics. The pair had stormed their way through the field and looked to have the commercial vehicle category safely wrapped up when drama struck yet again. Reinecker and Dreyer almost took the wrong road at a tricky route schedule instruction, but quickly recovered. Barker and Redden, also penalised 15 minutes for a technicality, were not so lucky and lost another 15 minutes when they strayed off the route. But spare a thought for Richard Carolyn. A second puncture was a cruel blow, and after leading at the refuel, Obut and Brother Bux finally found themselves down in 5th position. In all the action, Reinecker and Dreyer had moved into 2nd place, with Herman and Karl-Heinz Sulwald only seconds behind them in the Sulwald Vervoer Raceco. Back on the right route after their excursion off the correct course, Barker and Redden were right behind the Sulwald brothers, with the race developing into something of a lottery over the last 40 kilometres. There were no last-minute panics for motorcycle category leader Alfie Cox. The Italian was serenely on his way to a comfortable win. 10 minutes behind Cox, a brave Curtis was battling along on the Winston Yamaha, with a steady ride on the Pro Honda taking Alan Julian into 3rd place. A magnificent race of fluctuating fortunes was finally settled when Rob Walk brought the Shell Super Pave Raceco home to a popular win. It was Walk's 2nd national championship victory and only his 2nd race outing this year. Behind a delighted Walk, the Reinecker Dreyer family fan club went wild when the dealer team Toyota Land Cruiser crossed the line 2nd overall and victorious in the commercial vehicle category.
Just before refuel, I had a puncture, and I was, well, I don't know how many minutes behind Obut, but I managed to catch him in about half an hour, and then I just stayed in front.
The Sulwald cousins brought their racecar home in 3rd place, but it was Reinecker who summed up the tension of the final day of a great race.
Van al die veldrenne wat ek aan deelgeneem het, was dit die strafste kompetisie wat ek nog ooit gehad het, want ons het minimale tyd gestaan en ons het regtig 'n stywe pas aangesit. En ons kon net nie die voorste ouens vang nie. Ons het hulle hier op die einde, hier op nommer 99 kon verbygaan.
It took Alfie Cox 9 years to win the Toyota 1000 Desert Race. He made it 2 in a row with a convincing victory on the Pro Action Castrol KTM.
I've had quite a good run today. The marking's been excellent and that's helped the front runners a hell of a lot. The dust wasn't so bad today because there are not so many cars on the way. But I think for the back cars racing in the dust coming home is going to be pretty dangerous.
Second man home in the motorcycle category was Darrell Curtis on the Winston Yamaha after a race fraught with gearbox problems. A great overall win and victory in the special vehicle category for Rob Walk, and behind him all sorts of drama. Harvey Reiniker and Lucas Dreyer clinched the commercial vehicle category after a tremendous battle with Cliff Barker and Mike Redden. 2 in a row for Alfie Cox with 250 class machines in the first 4 places. Ati Hofmeyer took the 200 class just 42 seconds ahead of Clayton Ensslin, with Carl LaRue taking the 500 category. Toyota is proud to be associated with the Toyota 1000 Desert Race and salutes the winners in all the categories of one of the toughest events in the world.